stop touching grass. You are touching concrete. Your feet are the emergency brake for your brain, but most of us never press it. When you stand on rough pavement, specific sensors in your soles fire signals that travel straight to your brainstem. This mechanical input forces your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. You do not need a meditation cushion or an expensive device. You only need to let your skin press against the ground. This single action drops your heart rate variability and quiets the stress alarm. The biology is simple. The result is immediate. Schmid at Frontiers in Psychology showed that when you stop chasing abstract safety, your brain stops screaming. The data is stark. Barefoot on rough terrain activates the dorsal vagal complex directly, your sole's house Merkel discs and Pacinian corpuscles. These receptors convert pressure into electrical signals. They fire straight to the brainstem. No interpretation required. No mindfulness needed. The mechanical input bypasses the amygdala. Hassani and colleagues measured this in 20 minutes. Heart rate variability spikes. Sympathetic tone collapses. You do not need to visualize a forest. You do not need to chant mantras. You simply need friction between skin and stone. The insular cortex reads the texture. It updates the interoceptive map. Your nervous system recognizes the ground as real. It stops simulating danger. The result is a drop in blood pressure, a shift from fight to rest. This is not metaphor. This is mechanotransduction. Your feet are wired to your vagus nerve. When you press down, you pull the parasympathetic brake. The biology is cold and hard and perfect. The data from Hassani and colleagues clashes with earlier assumptions about how pressure triggers safety. One lab found that firm, static pressure on the arches spiked vagal tone instantly. Another team argued that only dynamic, repetitive movement could the dorsal vagal complex. Which constraint actually matters? The friction between skin and stone, or the rhythm of the step? Your nervous system is voting on this right now. When you roll your foot edge to edge, the Pacinian corpuscles fire in a specific cadence. They do not just signal weight. They signal pattern. The brainstem reads this as a distinct code, separate from simple compression. This is why a heavy boot does not calm you, but a precise barefoot sequence does. The mechanoreceptors are counting the microslips. They are decoding the texture of the ground to decide if you are safe. We are seeing a split in the research. Some models suggest the insula acts as a translator, converting that mechanical data into a chemical signal for the vagus nerve. Others propose a direct, electrical shortcut that bypasses the translator entirely. If the translator is right, then your internal awareness changes the outcome. If the shortcut is right, then your body is a hardwired reflex machine that ignores your thoughts. The stakes are higher now. If we can isolate the exact frequency of foot grounding that triggers this reflex, we could engineer a protocol that works even when your mind is racing. We could build a machine that mimics the perfect roughness of volcanic rock. Or we could realize that the only true grounding happens when the mechanical input forces your brain to stop simulating danger and start feeling reality. The next step requires us to measure the brain's reaction to a new kind of touch. The brainstem does not wait for permission. It processes the texture of the ground before your conscious mind even registers the step. When Pacinian corpuscles fire at a specific rhythm, they send a coded signal that bypasses the insula entirely, striking the nucleus ambiguous like a direct line to the vagus nerve. This is why a perfectly smooth yoga mat fails to trigger the response while jagged river stones succeed. The irregularity creates microslip events that reset the sympathetic alarm, something smooth surfaces simply cannot do. Daftery and his team measured this with precision, showing that dynamic, textured contact upregulates baroreflex sensitivity faster than any static posture Your body is not guessing safety. It is reading a mechanical barcode written in stone. This finding shatters the assumption that relaxation requires mental quiet. The nervous system can be mechanically forced into a parasympathetic state, regardless of what you are thinking. The friction between skin and stone acts as a biological interrupt, halting the HPA axis before cortisol spikes. We are witnessing a hardwired shortcut where external pressure translates immediately into internal calm. But here is the puzzle that keeps the research community awake at night. If the mechanical input is so, why do some people feel nothing while others feel everything? The answer lies in the individual's baseline vagal tone and the specific history of their nervous system, creating a threshold that varies wildly between humans. This variation suggests that the protocol is not one size fits all. The next step requires us to map these individual thresholds and find the precise mechanical frequency that unlocks the switch for everybody. A new paper from Daftery and his team changes the rules. They found that the brainstem does not wait for your conscious mind to interpret the ground. The Pacinian corpuscles in your soles fire a coded signal that bypasses the insula entirely, striking the nucleus ambiguous like a direct line to the vagus nerve. This is why a perfectly smooth yoga mat fails to trigger the response while jagged river stones succeed. The irregularity creates microslip events that reset the sympathetic alarm, something smooth surfaces simply cannot do. Your body is not guessing safety. It is reading a mechanical barcode written in stone. This finding shatters the assumption that relaxation requires mental quiet. The nervous system can be mechanically forced into a parasympathetic state, regardless of what you are thinking. The friction between skin and stone acts as a biological interrupt, halting the HPA axis before cortisol spikes. We are witnessing a hardwired shortcut where external pressure translates immediately into internal calm. But here is the puzzle that keeps the research community awake at night. If the mechanical input is so, why do some people feel nothing while others feel everything? The answer lies in the individual's baseline vagal tone and the specific history of their nervous system, creating a threshold that varies wildly between humans. This variation suggests that the protocol is not one size fits all. The next step requires us to map these individual thresholds and find the precise mechanical frequency that unlocks the switch for everybody. The threshold is not a wall, it is a filter. When you press your soles into stone, the mechanoreceptors fire, but the brainstem ignores the signal if your baseline tone is too low. You are not simply standing on the earth. You are testing your own biology against the ground. If the reflex does not spark, the mechanical input fails to translate into safety. The data suggests the nervous system requires a specific history of microtrauma to recognize the ground as real. Without that history, the rough texture registers as threat, not anchor. This is why a protocol that works for one person induces panic in another. The same jagged rocks that reset the sympathetic alarm in a seasoned hiker trigger a fight response in a sedentary mind. The body remembers the last time the ground hurt. It does not remember the last time it saved you. The protocol must account for this scar tissue in the nervous system. We cannot assume the mechanical shortcut exists for everyone. The next step requires us to find the specific tactile pattern that bypasses the trauma response and speaks directly to the dormant vagal fibers. The friction stops the fight. When your soles hit the stone, the signal hits the nucleus ambiguous before your thoughts even form. You do not need to clear your mind. The mechanics do the work. The baroreflex fires. Blood pressure stabilizes. The HPA axis halts. This is why the rough pavement works when the smooth mat fails. The irregularity resets the alarm. The pattern breaks the loop. But the protocol is not universal. Some bodies reject the input. The trauma response overrides the safety signal. The scar tissue in the nervous system blocks the signal. The reflex fails. This is why the same rocks that anchor one person trigger panic in another. The biology remembers the last time the ground hurt. The protocol must account for that history. We cannot apply the same pressure to everybody. The next step requires us to find the specific tactile pattern that bypasses the trauma and speaks directly to the dormant fibers. This is the missing link, the precise frequency that unlocks the switch for every nervous system. Your nervous system is not a static map. It is a living interface that updates with every microslip against the stone. The research team at the University of Pennsylvania found that when the insula receives fresh, chaotic data from the soles, it stops running simulations and starts recording reality. This is the moment the body stops predicting danger and begins feeling safety. You do not need to visualize the earth. You do not need to chant. The mechanical friction does the work. The Pacinian corpuscles fire, the nucleus ambiguous responds, and the HPA axis shuts down. This is the verdict. The ground is not a metaphor. It is a switch. And you can flip it right now. The full research archive lives at jmthomasofficial.com.